Have you ever wondered how 5 interlocking rings came to represent the global celebration of sports? And did you know that behind those vibrant loops lies a fortress of legal protections as solid as an Olympic gold medal? Well, today we're putting our detective hats on and chasing down the colorful history of the iconic Olympic rings flag. Join us as we unravel the story of this legendary symbol, from its creation by Pierre Coubertin in 1913 to its ironclad defenses against unauthorized use. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a history buff, or just curious about how symbols become untouchable, this episode has something for everyone. So tune in, relax, and let's get those rings spinning. This is Stuff You Should Know About IP. If you enjoy listening to us muse about IP and watching the random outputs of ChatGPT read aloud by humans on a Teams recording, well then don't forget to click the like button, share with a colleague, and leave a comment wherever you're listening. Today's episode of Stuff You Should Know About IP is brought to you by the Trademark Lawyer magazine. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the world of IP and trademarks, go to www.trademarklawyermagazine.com. Each issue is free to read for up to 8 weeks. That's www.trademarklawyermagazine for global news in the world of trademarks. All right, Tom, let's talk about these Olympic rings.
Absolutely. And by the way, since we're talking about the Olympic rings and the trademark consequences of using the Olympic rings, I should mention right off the bat that we are not affiliated with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, or the USOPC, which is the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So we're not sponsoring them. They're not affiliated with us because we don't want to have a problem, right? Especially when we're talking about problems with using the rings. And the other thing is we should probably make sure we let people know that this is kind of a tricky area of trademark law. So we definitely want to get feedback from people, from the millions of people that are watching this video. At the end, let us know what you think. But the big thing is this time of year, it's the Olympic season, and so many people can get value by connecting themselves to the Olympics in some way. Number one, you get clicks if you have Olympic stuff on your website or on your social media accounts. But number two, it's a point of pride, right? Whatever nation you're in, you're very prideful at this time of year that your athletes are competing. And if a business can be affiliated with that somehow, it gives them the opportunity to make more money. And if they could be affiliated without paying to be affiliated, all the better, right? But they can't because utilizing the Olympic rings and the terms Olympics is an issue of trademark infringement, which we're going to talk about. But I just want to mention before we get there that I read an article, which is that back in 1984, when the Olympics were in LA, it was like the first year that the Olympics started to become a big financial boon. Like one thing that I read was that in 1976, they had the Olympics in Montreal, and it took Montreal like 30 years to pay off their debts from the Olympics.
That's crazy.
Right. But then they started to leverage the power of the brand of the Olympics and sponsorships and advertisements, and they started making a lot of money. So
which year was this again? The LA?
Yeah, LA was 1984.
84. I'm just thinking about television, whether or not the fact that it was probably televised plays a big role in that and the advertising.
Well,
but LA wouldn't get that money.
Yeah, because of my age, though, Ray, unlike you, I was alive before 1984.
Well, I know television existed before.
There was TV, brother. There was TV.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that. But what I want to ask you first, though, before we dive in, is the Olympic rings. You got these 5 interlocking rings with various colors. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's symbolism behind it. The Olympic Committee created the logo of the interlocking rings originally in 1913, and they wanted it to reflect 4 key points. So the rings themselves, the shape of the ring, expresses the movement of the activity of the Olympic movement. Okay, and then the locking pattern represents the union of all 5 continents. So Europe, the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania. And then the colors of the rings in the white background stand for the flags of every nation that participates in the Olympic Games. And then the fact that all of the circles are equal represents in size represents that the all of the continents are equal at the games. And they were originally adopted in 1914. But it took 6 years for them to actually be introduced because the 1916 games were canceled because of World War I. And so this logo has been used for every summer and winter games since 1920. That was the 7th Olympiad at Antwerp. And they have been modified somewhat over the years. So in 57, they did a version where the spacing was more uniform than the original. And then in 86, they had where the rings overlap, they created like a little gap. So they were no longer interlocking. And then they changed it back in 2010. So now they're interlocking again. And that brings us up to the present day.
Okay. So these rings are really famous now, and everybody wants to use them, but they're actually owned by the International Olympic Committee. There's an Olympic charter that gives them ownership of all the properties, which include like the rings and the word Olympics, other things as well, other terms as well. But those are the big ones that people are thinking of, is the term Olympics and the rings. So then the IOC, who owns all these, granted the USOPC, which is the U.S. Olympic Paralympic Committee, the exclusive rights to use and enforce these properties in the U.S. Now, there's an interesting and important side note, which is the USOPC is responsible for the training and the funding of the teams. So it's a federally chartered nonprofit corporation, right? But it's entirely funded privately, right? Through people donating and through sponsorships. So they need money. And a big source of money for them is licensing the trademarks to sponsors who want to be affiliated with the Olympics so that they could get the big boost in sales and stuff like that, and market brand and things like that for being affiliated. So that's the trademark ownership thing. And as you may know, Ray, from watching all the videos on trademarks that we have, in the US, trademarks are protected by Title 15 of the US Code. And basically there's trademarks, and then there's trademark infringement, and there's two basic kinds of trademark infringement. Let me just bore you for a moment. There's likelihood of confusion infringement, and then there's trademark dilution. With likelihood of confusion, it's basically if your trademark that you're using is confusingly similar to one that came before you, such that the marketplace is confused as to who they're buying stuff from, that's a problem. That's trademark infringement, right? Like, if I'm buying what I think are Nike shoes, which have high quality, and I want Nike shoes, and somebody knocks off the Nike swoosh or the Nike name, so I buy shoes that I think are from Nike, but they're not. That hurts me as the consumer because now I'm not getting the high quality of Nike. It hurts Nike because they're not getting the revenue that they would otherwise get from my purchase. And it hurts them because their brand is now being associated with a lesser product, right?
Yeah.
So if there's confusion in the marketplace, there could be trademark infringement. But when you have a brand like Nike or the Olympic rings that are famous, you don't even have to show confusion as to source. You don't even have to show likelihood of confusion. You just merely using it dilutes the brand itself because it's so famous. So even in the absence of actual or likely confusion, there is a problem which creates this thing called trademark dilution, which is illegal, and it's grounds for an action, right?
So if everyone has the Olympic rings on their products, then the Olympic rings don't really mean. It's kind of like swearing or cursing, right? If everyone drops a swear word in like every other word in every sentence, the word no longer has meaning. So it's kind of like, is that a good analogy?
Power, right?
Yeah, it loses its power.
I've never heard that analogy before, but I kind of like it because you're right. It dilutes the power of the brand, right? If it's a famous mark. Now, if it's not a famous mark, the only way you're infringing is if there's a likelihood of confusion as to the source of the products or services. But when it's famous, you're right, it's diluting the power of the brand. Okay. So you would think that the discussion of whether using Olympic rings in connection with your products and services would be infringing, would be strictly based upon trademark principles, right? And Title 15 in the U.S. of the U.S. Code, and in that case, trademark fair use principles would apply, because there is fair use of trademarks. Like, it's not that you can't use a word just because someone has it as their trademark, because you might be using it in a way that's considered fair use. And here are some examples. So first, think of it this way, though. A trademark is anything used in commerce to indicate the source or origin of a product or service. Anything. It could be a word, it could be a graphic, it could be a holograph, it could be a trademark in motion, it could be a sound, it could be a scent. There's even a trademark out there on this yarn company for the scent of their yarn. It could be a color scheme. Those could all be trademarks, right? So if you are not using it as a trademark to indicate the source or origin of your products or services, fair use principles might apply. Okay. So fair use would be, here are some examples: news reporting and commentary, right? Product reviews. You could use the trademark for product reviews. Parody is like always a thing about fair use, right? Comparative advertising. If you do it correctly and you're not violating advertising principles, you could have fair use of a trademark. Compatibility claims, and identifying customers. These are uses which are not being used as a trademark. So you're not creating an environment where people think that you are affiliated with them. So these are the principles that would normally apply. But there's this weird thing in the U.S., which is this Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act. Okay. It's a separate act from the Title 15. It's actually Title 36 of the U.S. Code. It's a totally different section, and it addresses trademark issues with respect to the Olympic symbols. So it's exclusively for the Olympic symbols. An act was created for the Olympic symbols.
Wow.
And basically they're saying that you can't use Olympics, you can't use the 5 interlocking rings, you can't use words, like Paralympic, Paralympiad, Pan American, Parapan American, other words that are owned by the U.S. Olympic Committee under this act, which is this Ted Stevens Act. So that gives the power to this USOPC to generate licensing revenues associated with their trademark. But even though it's a totally separate section, when you read the enforcement provision of Title 36, they refer to Title 15. And basically they're saying that, you can't use they're using Title 15 trademark infringement principles in the enforcement. And just let me bore you just for another moment before we get on with the discussion.
Yeah, hurry up. I'm falling asleep. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. I'm on the hook here.
Okay. So what they're saying is you can't use these marks, right, in a way that tends to cause confusion or mistake, to deceive, or to falsely suggest a connection with the Olympic Committee, right? Or the Olympics, right? Or the Olympic activities. And you can't use them to falsely represent association with or authorization by the U.S. Olympic Committee. And you can see why, right? Because they need money. They have to fund these teams. The primary way that they make money is with sponsorship, because companies like Coca-Cola pay a lot of money to be able to legitimately show the world that they are sponsors. They are authorized by the U.S. Olympic Committee to use their mark. It builds their brand. It makes people like them more, right? They want to buy their stuff. So they pay a lot of money for this, right? And that's how the Olympic Committee is funded. So you can appreciate that they don't want people violating this and using them, using their rings without paying for it, essentially. Yeah. Right? So you would think then, with this in mind, so how can you use it, right? with all this in mind, when can you use the Olympic rings in connection with stuff you're doing? Like we're doing something, right, Ray?
Yeah.
I'm sure that you are going to put the Olympic rings on this podcast that we're doing and the term Olympics, and we're talking about it, but we're saying right up front, we're not affiliated. We are not violating any rules because we are not affiliated with the Olympics in any way. We're just doing a commentary on it, right?
Yeah.
It'd be like a fair use thing, right? So
Absolutely.
you should be able to use them under fair use provisions, right? You should be able to use them if you are not causing confusion or mistake, you're not deceiving, you're not falsely suggesting a connection with the U.S. Olympic Committee, and you're not falsely representing that you're associated with or authorized by the U.S. Olympic Committee. If you're not doing those things, you should be able to use them, right?
Yeah.
But in all that I've read about this, the IOC and the USOPC are extremely aggressive about protecting their marks, and they're suing people, right? So you have to tread very carefully because you don't want to be close to the line, because being sued means you're going to spend a fortune on a lawsuit. And even if you prevail, even if you prove that it's fair use or that you're not causing confusion or mistake or deceiving, or you're not creating you're not representing that you're associated with them, and you hire your lawyers and you go into court and you defend yourself and you win, it could cost you tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. And you might even get some bad press because they're accusing you, this great body, the Olympic, the USOPC is accusing you of being a bad guy. And that's not good for your brand, right? So either way, you should tread carefully with respect to your use. But so let's do a few examples, Ray.
Well, and I just want to say before you go on, I would say that if the Olympic Committee decides to sue us, I think that would probably help our brand. I think it would make them look bad. I mean, here we are. Right. I'm putting that logo on the thumbnail of this video. Here we are trying to explain to people how they can and can't, and mostly just can't use this logo. And then they sue us. Oh, I would be outraged.
Yes. And people would say, wow, Tom and Ray are good guys trying to do the right thing, and they're getting sued.
Yeah, we're trying to help them. We're trying to help you by educating. Basically, what we're saying is just don't use them. Don't use the rings. Don't put it on that T-shirt. Like, just forget about it.
Yeah, be careful. So let's use 3 examples of situations that are various extremes, right?
Yeah.
So the first one I want to mention is a case that maybe some people have watched. It's going on right now. The USOPC is suing a company called Prime Hydration, which was founded by a guy named Logan Paul, who's an American YouTuber, and KSI, who's a British YouTuber. And basically, so they have this massively successful drink business, right? Mm-hmm. They're actually competing successfully against some Coca-Cola brands. And they got into a partnership with Kevin Durant. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a basketball player.
Yeah.
He's playing in his 4th consecutive Olympics. He's got 3 gold medals already, and he's competing in Paris in 2024 on the U.S. Olympic team, right? And they've got a partnership with him. There's like a bunch of ads with Kevin Durant holding their drinks. And here's the problem. He is an Olympic basketball player, but they're using terms in their advertising: Olympic, Olympian, Team USA, and going for the gold. Okay?
Yeah.
So by everybody's view, they are in your face saying, we are a sponsor of the Olympics, right? I mean, they're not saying those words, but that's kind of how you feel, right?
Right. I mean, I definitely, if I see that, there's a connection between this drink brand and the Olympics. They're somehow working together.
Right. So you could appreciate why not only would the USOPC be angry, but Coca-Cola and other big time sponsors would be angry because what Prime is doing is they're getting the same kind of jump in the marketplace with their connection with the USOPC and the Olympics as Coca-Cola, who's spending, I'm sure, I don't even know what the number is. I don't know how much they're spending, but I guarantee you it's a lot.
Yeah.
So Everybody's angry about this. And this is an extreme example of just, excuse me, in your face trademark infringement associated with the the Olympic word, the Olympic
Right.
rings, and that sort of thing. So what do you think? I mean,
I don't.
the
The
case
only
isn't
way
over, but
yeah, the only way I could see that working. So if they have a deal with Kevin Durant and he's an Olympian, I almost would say it'd be fair for them to say, like, drink of choice for Olympian Kevin Durant,
right,
right?
right,
Because
yeah,
he's an Olympian, right?
right, right,
And
right.
and he's they're a sponsor. There's a sponsorship there. Like, isn't that a
Wait. There's no sponsorship,
well,
but you're saying
Kevin
there's an
Durant is.
affiliation
He's
between Kevin
yeah, I don't know
and the
what the right
Olympics.
terminology is, but Kevin
You know,
Durant
I know.
is a paid representative of this drink brand, and he's an
Yes,
Olympian. So
yes.
I would think if I'm that business, it's just an objective fact that Kevin Durant is an Olympian, and because he's a spokesperson for us, that's how we can describe him.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, that might be a pretty good argument. Now, if you look at what the rights are that they have from that under this Ted Stevens Act, they have the exclusive right to all the trademarks and that, all the words, and they can prevent you from falsely representing association with or authorization by the International Olympic Committee or the USOPC, right? So if this were normal trademark law, I would say you're right. You're walking close to the line, but you're not over the line. But then the question is, if you said simply this is the favorite drink of Olympic basketball player Kevin Durant. You're using the word Olympic, right? Probably using some colors in that. That would probably be close to the line, maybe not over the line, because are you falsely representing an association with the Olympics or just with an Olympic athlete, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good way to look at it, Ray. I like your thought process on that because it's close. You could say it's close. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just saying that this great Olympic athlete who is legitimately an Olympic athlete loves our drink. And but what they did then is they used the terms Olympic, Olympian, which they're probably saying he's an Olympian, right? Team USA, which is true. He is on Team USA and going for the gold, which is true. He is going for the gold, right?
Yeah.
But the USOPC has this Ted Stevens Act behind them to say that you cannot create something that appears to be a sponsorship or affiliation where one does not exist with the USOPC or the Olympics.
Yeah.
And they do not have an affiliation or sponsorship with the USOPC or the Olympics, just with an Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
So I love the way you think about this, Ray, because
the problem is that you would have to be very careful in the way you word it in your promotional material, in your marketing. And typically that's not conducive to like a good marketing campaign. Because what you want to do is you want to have the drink with a picture of Kevin Durant and have it just say going for the gold. And in that kind of a context, it's not clear now. Right. Because unless you say what you said, like favorite drink of Olympian Kevin Durant, who is going for the gold, then the context is a little bit different because you're just sort of describing Kevin Durant as opposed to just putting going for the gold on. It's like, well, is this an Olympic drink or is this a Kevin Durant drink or what?
Yeah, and if you now this would kind of like kill the buzz, but they might be safer if they said something like, we are not a sponsor of the U.S. Olympics or
put a little
International
disclaimer
Olympics
on there. Yeah, but
that would kill the buzz, right? Because now because it's more words and it's kind of like you got this great, cool, positive, and now it's a negative. Like, why aren't you a sponsor? So that is going to be an interesting outcome. I think Prime is going to be in trouble on this, but I like your mentality, and that's certainly the argument that probably the argument that they'll make is that we're just talking about our affiliation with Kevin Durant, who is an Olympian. We're not talking about our affiliation with the Olympics, but the colors are there. I think they even used the rings, you know?
Yeah. I don't know.
So,
I
but I
agree.
think
It
they
sounds like they're in
certainly,
trouble.
Prime certainly needs trademark training, right? Like they should buy our services to get trademark training. So,
Yeah.
by the way, so let's jump to
I'll
the
be making
next
a
example.
call.
Yeah, let's jump to the next example. And I want you to give me a little background of this because I know we talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
The Redneck Olympics.
Yeah.
Before we talk about their issue, can you give us a little background on what the Redneck Olympics are?
Yeah, so this is so great. I had no idea this existed until like
Till
a week
yesterday.
ago. But
Yeah.
this is so awesome. So the Redneck Olympics, sometimes it's called the Redneck Games, and there might be a reason for that. So it's basically the South's way of saying, in America, it's the South's way of saying we like our sports with a side of ridiculous. So they've been doing this since 1996, East Dublin, Georgia. And basically, these redneck games, the redneck Olympics, they're kind of like the ultimate tribute to all things hilariously Southern. So imagine mud pit belly flops,
That's one of the events.
mud pit belly flops. Okay, I've got a list of what they do. Toilet seat horseshoes, hubcap hurling. It's definitely as wild as it sounds. So
that's like
competitors,
the discus, right? That's like the disc.
right? Yeah, exactly. So the competitors, they show up in overalls and like mullet wigs, and they're bobbing for pig's feet, just trying to claim their spot in redneck glory. And the whole thing basically started as a tongue-in-cheek response to the '96 Atlanta Olympics, but it's become a much loved tradition, and it's a mix of humor and Southern charm, and it seems to draw a kind of mixed bag of people who are eager to embrace this absurd kind of athleticism and just have a good laugh.
Yeah.
But it's been criticized as being kind of like a stereotype fest. But if you look at the people who are participating, I mean, they're having a blast. There's community, and they're celebrating their unique culture. Honestly, after looking into it a little bit, I was like, I want to go to this way more than I want to go to the Olympics.
Yeah, now here's the thing though. So U.S. Olympic Committee are suing, I think his name is Brooks or something. Wait, what's his name again? Let me see. His name is Harold Brooks. Now, so they're suing him for like trademark infringement, violating, again, the enforcement infringements are under Title 15, but the power comes from Title 36, which is this Ted Stevens Act. So what Harold Brooks is saying, though, is number one, this is parody, okay? And that would be a fair use defense, right?
Sure.
But the fair use defense, if you are suggesting an affiliation under Title 36, would still be a problem. And what he's saying is we're not saying that we're affiliated because the actual Olympics would never be affiliated with the Redneck Olympics, right?
I gotta say, when I was looking into this, like all you have to do is do just some light Googling, and I'm genericizing that term, by the way.
Right. Yeah, you've just stabbed Google.
But I'm sorry, Google. Generic. But I did some light Googling. That's what I say. And so like just looking at it, there's no way you would be confused that this had anything to do with the actual Olympics. That's just me as someone who looked at it for the first time. I'm like, obviously it's not the real Olympics.
Right. Okay. But let's look at one other trademark principle, which is not infringement based upon likelihood of confusion or an unlawful affiliation, or, trying to say that you're affiliated.
Yeah.
What about trademark dilution? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, under the Lanham Act.
Yeah.
Remember,
I have a point about that. But go ahead.
Go ahead. Let me hear your thoughts on
it. Well, I mean, so okay. You could make an argument that it's dilution, but I think that in the modern world we live in, media everywhere, social media, television everywhere, everyone knows what the Olympics are. And I don't think that in other words, I think that the marketplace is well informed about what the Olympics are. And you could use the term Olympic to mean in almost any category of anything, right? It doesn't even have to be athleticism, right? Like you could say the stupidity Olympics, or the academic Olympics. Like it's got
right. Keep in mind though, when you're looking at trademark, there's trademark infringement, trademark dilution. Do you know that there's a company in Western New York called Ford Gumballs, right?
Yeah.
Then there's another company in Detroit called Ford Automobiles. The same name Ford can be used on two totally different products because there's no likelihood of confusion, or at least back then, Ford wasn't considered a famous mark, maybe when Ford Gumballs came out. But you can use two trademarks on totally different products, and that's okay as long as there's no likelihood of confusion. And saying that, Olympics, like, hey, we have right near the airport in Buffalo, there's an Olympics restaurant, right? I don't know if you've been to that Greek restaurant, Olympics, but there's no doubt that's not confusingly similar. But anyway, the trademark dilution, though, that's more about diluting the brand, even if there is no likelihood of confusion, even if everybody knows that the redneck Olympics or the, stupidity Olympics or whatever, or the whatever Olympics are not affiliated with the Olympics. It could still be an issue of trademark dilution. And I mean, and we are not experts on this Olympic thing. We started reading about it yesterday, and I thought, oh, this will be simple. I had no idea it was so complicated. But and I'm sure somebody can weigh in on this and tell us how we're totally wrong. But it seems to me that there's no issue of affiliation because there's no way the Olympics would be affiliated with the Redneck Olympics.
Sure.
There's no issue of likelihood of confusion. There's no issue of falsely promoting that you're a sponsor. But trademark dilution could be an issue in this case for Harold Brooks. I heard he made a comment like, I'm not referring to the Olympics that you have. I'm referring to the ones back in like Greece, a few thousand years ago. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm connecting to. And you don't own those rights. That's what that's his, I think that was his argument.
He's not an IP lawyer, is he?
Yeah, he's not. Harold Brooks is not. He never took our training, right?
Yeah.
So I think Harold's going to have a problem. My gut feeling is that several of the categories that we've discussed will not be a problem, except the dilution issue could be a big problem for him.
Yeah.
So
as I'm thinking through, well, go ahead.
No, you go. Because I was going to jump to the next example.
Well, as I'm thinking through this, there is something to be said for the fact that if it wasn't called the Redneck Olympics, it probably wouldn't get as much attention. The Redneck Games just doesn't have as great of a sound to it.
And yeah, you're right. The Redneck Olympics gives it something.
It gives it something.
Immediate notoriety. Because as soon as you hear Redneck Olympics, you're like, oh, that's cool. And you wouldn't, like, what if they didn't even call it the Redneck Games? What if they called it the Redneck Events, right? You wouldn't even think about it.
This is really important, though. Can you just repeat the definition of trademark dilution?
Yeah. Basically, I want to make sure I get this correct. So let me...
Because it's really important to know exactly what trademark dilution means in this context. Well, and then put it into this context.
So basically, I'm just going to read this real quick. The owner of a famous mark is entitled to an injunction against another person who uses a mark or trade name in commerce that is likely to cause dilution of the famous mark, regardless of the presence or absence of actual or likely confusion, of competition, or of actual economic injury. Okay? So in other words, if it's a famous mark, and you use it in connection in commerce, which means in connection with your products and services, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's causing dilution.
But dilution in that definition means what? Diminishes the brand, the brand of the original in some way?
The trademark. Yeah, the original trademark.
The trademark,
Yeah, the trademark. So if you're taking, let's say that we have a company called Executive IP, right?
Yeah.
And that's also our trademark, Executive IP. If somebody were to use, now we have a corporate training company. We make corporate training videos related to intellectual property fundamentals, among other things. if somebody came up with a lawnmower brand called Executive IP, would that be a problem with respect to trademark infringement? And the answer would be no, because one of the questions you ask when dealing with likelihood of confusion is the evidence of consumer confusion, the type of goods involved, and the marketing channels used. Like, are we selling things that are so close that people might think we're the same company? If somebody came out with executive IP for training videos or live training, it might be so close that they would be guilty of trademark infringement. But for a lawnmower service, nobody's going to think that executive IP training videos would make the jump to be in the lawnmower business. They're two totally different companies. But what they're saying, the other type of infringement is this dilution. You don't have to show likelihood of confusion or actual confusion. You don't even have to show that you're in competition. You don't even have to show that you have actual economic injury. So it's almost like just using the brand in commerce, which means in connection with your products and services, puts you at risk of an anti-dilution action.
Right.
And that's what I see as his Achilles heel.
Do you think it matters? Do you think it matters that the Redneck Olympics are kind of a joke, and that takes away from the prestige of the real Olympics?
Yeah, again, dilution, right? Because it's kind of a funny conflict. There's fair use of trademarks, and parody is definitely considered a fair use of trademarks. But then when you get into famous marks and dilution, now it's almost like parody, you're making fun of the Olympics, actually creates a dilution situation.
Yeah.
So anyway, just because I don't want to kill people with time on this,
it'd be interesting to see what the result is of that.
And it's going to be interesting to see what people say about this. People who are real experts at like use of the Olympic rings and the term Olympics in combination with trademark infringement and anti-dilution laws,
Yeah. So if you're watching this, please leave a comment.
Weigh in. Tell us how we're wrong. So another thing then is, so what about something way softer? Okay. And by the way, what I'm about to say is what provoked us to do this video in the first place. Somebody that we know posted something on LinkedIn, and it simply said this: we wish our Olympic athletes the best of success in Paris. And then it had the Olympic rings, okay? And it had their brand, right? It had this company's brand, which I won't mention. So the question is that okay? Right? Because the guy actually sent me an email saying, is this okay? And I poked around a little bit and said, you should probably take it down. Because it's under Title 36, it's giving the impression that you're maybe a sponsor or that you're affiliated. And all they did was wish the athletes good luck and use the rings. That's a question that I'd love to get people's feedback on. Is that okay? Right?
Yeah.
Because if you're the Olympics, you might say, no, that's not okay, because you're basically saying that you're an affiliate of ours or that you're a sponsor of ours because you're wishing the athletes good luck and you're using our rings. And it's with respect to your business. It's not like you're, teaching a classroom or something. It's a commercial enterprise. So fair use principles kind of go out the window. But then the other side of it is, all we're doing is saying good luck to our Olympic athletes and letting them know that we are, supporting them. Yeah. Right. But then the Olympic Committee can come back and say, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You're saying you're affiliated with them, right? You're kind of like a sponsor of them, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think for an individual to do that without promoting their own company in the same breath, obviously that's fine. But I think the problem is that having the company logo there.
Right. But you say obviously, but let's jump into one other quick thing, which is how many people are out there right now as social media influencers and making a lot of money with ads associated with their TikTok videos and their Instagram videos, sure. Right? Those are individuals who would probably love to get some clickbait, which is have the word Olympics, the rings, to get people to come so that more people watch them, so they get more clicks, which means they get more money for ads. So normally you'd think, yeah, an individual just wishing good luck. If I did it, for example, I'm not a social media influencer. I don't make any money. We don't make any money from this podcast we're doing. So if we were to do it, it might be a little bit less so. But if you're an influencer who's making a lot of money, I don't know. I think you're crossing over. So my overall message is, if you're going to use the Olympic rings or the term Olympics in connection with your commercial enterprise, be careful, because you might find yourself on the wrong end of an action by the USOPC or the IOC.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was a super interesting podcast. This might be my favorite one that we've done all year. Now, to be fair, we've only done like four or five this year.
Yeah, right.
But
and
if
we
you
didn't
could believe
do the
it,
Burger King one this year. We didn't do the one where we bought the Whoppers.
Oh,
that
yeah,
was last
yeah.
year, because that was a good one.
Yeah, the Impossible versus
No, this was the false advertising claim. Remember we bought the Whoppers.
Yes. Yeah.
No,
we gotta do that.
One. We did that one.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't need the excuse to eat a Whopper, but I mean, if you'll give me one, then no problem.
Exactly, but that was a great excuse to eat a Whopper.
Well, if you enjoy listening to us talk about IP, and especially in the context of the Olympics and how you can and can't use these rings, definitely click that like button, hit subscribe, share, comment, share your thoughts, especially comment. We're really curious to know if any of you Olympic experts out there know anything that we should probably consider. So thanks again for making it all the way to the end of the episode. I got to say, this is like a masterclass in IP. I've been doing this now with you for like 4 or 5 years, and I have learned so much. So everyone in the IP industry should be watching this podcast, especially anyone who's new to the business.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. See ya.